Because the woman I was seeing got pregnant, our relationship is over. Right after we got married, we were forced to live with my in-laws, making it impossible for us to have a proper married life. Perhaps that contributed to the situation. My husband Andrew cheated on me with a younger woman and got her pregnant. Moreover, this happened on a day we both finished work early and had planned to go out to eat together for the first time in a while. Because of the pregnancy, a divorce was inevitable. What was the point of the nearly 10 years I had devoted to our dream with Andrew? Before I knew it, I was back at home, starting to pack my things, with no time to wallow in despair. You can't complain, right? You neglected making an effort to get pregnant and escaped into your work. And you're not getting any younger, taking your sweet time. I warned you many times. Karen, my MIL, didn't blame Andrew at all for cheating. Instead, she blamed me for not being able to have children over the years. Being a wife apparently means absolutely having to bear children. It felt like my existence could be replaced by anyone, and that realization was more shocking than the affair itself. Then our divorce was finalized, and I started enjoying a graceful single life. Until a phone call disrupted it. From Andrew. Andrew spoke with a shaken voice. What's going on? The child isn't mine. This is terrible. I am Donna, a 36-year-old caregiver. When my best friend got married, I woke up to the idea of marriage hunting. She was part of the group I had been close with since my student days, and for a long time, it had been just the two of us remaining single. While all other friends got married in their 20s and some became mothers, I ended up being the only single one. Attending her wedding, I genuinely felt happy for her, but I also couldn't deny a sense of urgency. Knowing my longing for marriage, she introduced me to new people and I attended a marriage hunting event for the first time. That's where I met my husband, Andrew. Overwhelmed by the atmosphere of the event, I could hardly make eye contact with anyone, but Andrew approached me. Being in sales, Andrew was good at conversation, and his easygoing nature had me talking about my upbringing, hobbies, and just about everything else before I knew it. After the event, we naturally exchanged contact information and went on several dates, eventually becoming a couple. Andrew, who could assert himself, seemed very attractive to indecisive me, and I had been conscious of marriage throughout our relationship. He proposed, understanding the irregular hours of my caregiving job. And my friends were genuinely happy for me, marking the happiest moment of my life. Later, at a family meeting at my in-laws' house, I hit it off with my CL, Betty. Betty, who loved art enough to visit museums alone on her days off, shared her interest with me, and I had always wanted to go museum hopping. Noticing Andrew and Karen looking at us in astonishment, we decided to save our conversation for another time, but I was already thrilled. Later, I asked Betty for her contact information, and she gladly gave it to me. Since then, picking up Betty and going to museums together became a joy. But Betty would sometimes apologize. Donna, I hate to always impose on you. I really want to get my driver's license too, but with my legs like this, I always end up asking you to come pick me up. Betty's gaze fell on her legs. Due to an accident in her childhood, Betty had been unable to walk and spent most of her life in a wheelchair. Knowing the long trips she had to take by train, bus, or cab to visit museums, I made it a point to pick her up from my in-laws' house when we planned to go together. Betty always felt bad about it, often expressing her feelings this way. I've told you many times, I don't mind at all. I'm tagging along with your hobby, so please let me do this much. In truth, I considered Betty like a real sister. I was happy to spend holidays with her, and I sincerely told her she could call me for even trivial things without hesitation. Yet, Betty continued, I'll end up useless if I rely too much on others. She said, always trying to handle her affairs by herself, a strong-willed person. That made sense, considering Betty had founded a wheelchair brand company in her 20s and was always busy, except for her museum visits on weekends. Despite living at her parents' home and working remotely, she managed to earn a stable income and even contributed to household expenses to Karen. I found Betty even more admirable for this and often talked about her with Andrew. Whenever we planned museum trips, I would invite Andrew, but I'm good. I don't really get that kind of stuff. He would always decline. After the wedding, when the numerous procedures finally settled down, the topic naturally turned to our living situation. While we had been renting a slightly larger apartment during our cohabitation, respecting Andrew's wish to build a house, we agreed to live temporarily at his parents' house until we saved enough funds. I had heard that Andrew's father had passed away a few years ago, so I expected that his study would become our room. Though I understood having a room was a luxury, the idea of living with someone else's family was still unnerving. Especially since Karen began subtly bringing up the topic of children every time we met. Having children earlier is always better. I say this from experience. You have more energy for parenting when you're younger, and it allows you to think about having a second or third child, right? I had Andrew in my teens, and everywhere I went, people would say how young I looked as a mom. Initially, she would talk about wanting to see her grandchildren soon, but after half a year of living together, she would sigh upon seeing me and say, "I wonder why Andrew married someone so provincial. I always told him to marry young and have kids early, like me. It's better for me too, since I can play with my grandchildren while I'm still young. You don't seem like an appealing woman enough to break my advice for. You're not neglecting to try for a baby because you're busy with your caregiving job, are you?" Her comments about us not having children became increasingly direct. However, Karen only grumbled about such things and never went as far as to harass me by imposing household chores or doing something in front of Andrew or Betty. I thought it was probably because I was closely involved in assisting with Betty's daily life. She seemed to find helping Betty bothersome and preferred to leave it to me, wanting to avoid disrupting this arrangement. To me, helping Betty, whom I admired, never felt like a burden. I often thought life could be peaceful without Karen's constant nagging for grandchildren, but I didn't want to disturb Andrew, who was working hard with overtime and weekend shifts to save for our house. So, I decided to focus on my job first and put off thinking about pregnancy for a while. Getting used to living together happened in no time, and before I knew it, almost 10 years had passed. Karen kept insisting that taking a loan for the house was a waste of money and discouraged it. Just as our savings were about to reach the target amount, Andrew suddenly brought up a serious discussion. That day, both Andrew and I were finishing work early and had booked a nice, stylish restaurant for dinner, something we hadn't done in a while. "Go ahead and get a table. I'll join you soon," Andrew texted, so I went ahead to the restaurant to wait for him, browsing the menu. Since Karen disliked dining out, Andrew and I rarely had the chance to eat out since getting married, making this time alone with him all the more precious. I was trying to calm my excited heart and enjoy the moment when Andrew shattered it in the worst possible way. "Sorry to keep you waiting. Got held up with some overtime." Hearing Andrew's voice, I relaxed and turned towards him with a smile. Standing there in his suit was Andrew, and next to him, a noticeably younger woman. For a moment, I thought she might be a relative, but neither Andrew nor I had a female relative around her age. "Please divorce me." That was all Andrew said. Or perhaps he said something else, but I don't remember. Just that single sentence from Andrew made everything clear, including why he brought a pregnant woman I didn't know to this place. The woman was Sandra, Andrew's mistress. A lovely young woman who had just joined the company this year. She seemed kind. But despite meeting for the first time, she never averted her gaze from mine, which made me think that a woman willing to bear the child of someone else's husband must indeed be bold. Why should I, who did nothing wrong, be subjected to such scorn? Sandra was much younger than us. Why Andrew of all people? Naturally, I lost all appetite in such a tumultuous situation and left the restaurant as if fleeing, but embarrassingly, my only place to return was my in-laws' house. Thinking I should at least pack the bare minimum before leaving, I headed straight there. Upon returning home, Karen was standing at the entrance. Knowing the situation, she looked at me with a sneer. "Did you listen to what Andrew had to say? This happened because you didn't try hard enough, so don't run away. Talk it out." "What do you mean?" I wondered what Andrew's affair and my effort had to do with each other. Could Karen still be justifying Andrew's infidelity because she thought I was too provincial? Trying to suppress the urge to lash out, I started shaking. Noticing this, Karen laughed. "Are you crying? It's too late for regrets now. This happened because you abandoned your duty as a wife. I've warned you many times. It's annoying to be cried to now when it was you who didn't listen. Karen seemed determined to blame me for not getting pregnant. Despite enduring Karen's whims and complaints and maintaining what I thought was a good relationship with Andrew, I felt alienated, realizing my efforts were unnoticed. Then, at the worst possible timing, Andrew came home. With Sandra. Apparently, Karen knew Sandra was coming over today. "Please come in, Sandra," she said, cheerily inviting Sandra inside. "This might be our last discussion since we're getting divorced anyway. But you don't stand a chance, so let's wrap this up quickly," Andrew said, passing by me, still standing frozen at the entrance. Dizzy with this nightmare-like development, I went to the living room where the three of them waited. "I've always wanted kids." Donna trampled on my feelings, using work as an excuse. "I don't have feelings for her anymore. Please divorce me." Hearing the declaration of divorce for the second time today struck me even harder. Without making eye contact with anyone, I just stared at Sandra's pregnant belly. Since old times, it's been decided that a wife's role is to bear children. Yet, you couldn't even manage to get pregnant, let alone bear a son. Hate me all you want, but do you also despise showing me a cute grandchild? Karen lamented ostentatiously while giving me a contemptuous smile. Andrew was the one refusing pregnancy, using work as an excuse. I knew he was working hard for our home's finances. I thought it was understandable not to focus on having children for now. But to think he was cheating during that time, I can't believe it. Feeling miserable, I fought back tears. For the first time, Sandra glared at me and said, "Hysterical women are so annoying. That's why Andrew dumped you." Karen joined in, opening her mouth to agree. "It's shameful to blame others. You clearly neglected your efforts as a woman." In contrast, Sandra is mature despite being only 20, even supporting Andrew's work at the company. Someone who stands by him personally like that. A woman who can't bear children like you is unnecessary. Karen, who had always said women shouldn't work, praising Sandra now, represented a stark contradiction. Karen and Sandra, along with Andrew, exchanged looks and nodded in agreement. The real issue was Andrew impregnating a young woman despite having a wife, yet that went unmentioned. Instead, they encouraged my divorce, making me feel Karen was beyond redemption as a person. Just as I was contemplating whether to simply agree to the divorce or how to claim compensation in a divorce trial. "Wait a moment." Betty appeared. Seeing Betty for the first time, Sandra looked puzzled, and upon hearing from Andrew, "She's my sister who can't walk properly." Sandra visibly showed her disdain towards Betty. Undeterred by the cold looks from others, Betty approached us. "Isn't it strange that both the mother and Andrew are defending adultery? Have you both forgotten everything Donna has done for you? Living together with consideration, working from dawn till dusk to pay the living expenses, accepting everything without a frown, even willingly taking care of my needs. I wonder if Sandra can do the same in the future." At Betty's words, Karen stood up furiously and erupted. "Don't act like you know everything when you can't even live independently. Do you have any idea how much I've struggled because of you? Isn't it because of your condition that you can't find a marriage partner? Don't get ahead of yourself just because you're the president of a small company. You should keep quiet. You're just looking at Donna as a caregiver, aren't you? That's why you're desperately trying to stop the divorce. You pretending to be virtuous is the worst, and if you don't like Sandra, why don't you leave? Betty and Donna should live together from now on." Andrew's mockery of Betty was even uglier than when his affair came to light. "That's enough. I will divorce you as you wish and leave this house." "Donna." Betty looked at me sadly, but my decision was firm. "Betty, let's stop associating with these people. Will you come with me? Really planning to live together, huh? Donna has strange tastes." Andrew laughed, but I ignored him, took the divorce papers he was holding, signed them, and then went to pack my things. I was serious about leaving with Betty. So, I packed Betty's things in the car as well, and we stayed in a hotel for a few days while looking for a house. Fortunately, we found a barrier-free house not too far from my workplace, and I was able to sign the contract immediately using our saved funds. At that moment, I was glad that I had separated my debit card from Andrew's and felt that fate might be on my side. Naturally, by running away from home, I cut ties with Andrew and Karen, ensuring they wouldn't know our whereabouts. Living with Betty was very comfortable. Despite Karen's berating about Betty's inability to move her legs, Betty could do most of the household chores. The new house came equipped with a kitchen accessible from a wheelchair, and we bought the latest washing machine. It was clear that those people hadn't made any effort to create a comfortable living environment for Betty. Disgusted by their readiness to complain about their hardships, I decided to sever ties. For things Betty absolutely couldn't do, I helped out, and otherwise, we lived freely on our own. Just when our new life felt like a lie compared to our cramped past. A call came from Andrew. "What do you want?" Sounding very disturbed. Andrew then said, "The child was born, but it's not mine." To summarize, a few days ago, Sandra had given birth, and Andrew had gone to visit. There, he unexpectedly met a man who introduced himself with a smile as Sandra's husband, Paul. Confused, Andrew explained that he was Sandra's husband and the father of the newborn. "Sandra is my wife. We have a marriage certificate." But Paul's expression quickly hardened. Sandra remained silent when confronted. After being asked to leave by a nurse as visiting hours ended, Andrew and Paul argued outside the hospital. Eventually, it turned out that Sandra was indeed Paul's wife, and the newborn was their child. A fact Andrew also felt once he saw the baby, having no resemblance to himself, confirming his suspicions. Finally understanding the situation, I intuitively felt that Andrew hadn't called just for a casual chat. And, unfortunately, my intuition was right. I was deceived by Sandra. She told me she got pregnant soon after we started dating, which I thought was strange. I planned to get a settlement from Sandra and then try to reconcile with Donna. What? I must have raised my voice without realizing it because Betty, who was in the same room, turned around in surprise. Cheating and now demanding money from Sandra because of their dispute? Andrew had the nerve to contact me without any sign of remorse, despite such an obviously flawed plan. At this point, any resentment I felt was irrelevant. I just wanted to end the call quickly, but the foolish man on the other end kept talking carelessly. "Donna, I know what you're going to say. But I called because there's another problem. Sandra and Paul are fighting." Paul, angry at Sandra. "I can't be seen with a wife who cheats. I don't want a child with such a woman. It's unfortunate for the child, but I'll pay the minimum child support. Please, let's get a divorce." "For cheating," said Sandra, begging Paul. "You earn more, so you should support me. You promised. I quit my job to be a housewife, so I can't start working again," said. Witnessing this scene, Andrew was declared by Paul to demand a settlement, which infuriated him. "I'm a victim here too. But then, we only kissed, so it's impossible for the child to be yours. You knew that and still dated me, so we should split the settlement," Sandra argued. Caught in this complicated mess, I felt no sympathy for Andrew, who had involved himself and still mistakenly thought I harbored feelings for him. "It's your own responsibility," I said, cutting off the call unilaterally. To the worried Betty, I explained it was just a persistent sales call, and later, I made sure to block Andrew's contact. Sometime after, I noticed unusual noise outside. Betty was busy with her company's paperwork, so I quietly opened the front door. Outside, a couple was talking in front of a neighboring apartment. Upon making eye contact, they hurried over. "We finally found you. What have you been doing without contacting us?" It was Karen and Andrew. How they found us or why they suddenly appeared was beyond me. "You ignored my calls, so it was hard to find you. But I'll forgive you if you agree to remarry me, so let's go back home together. Sandra was the worst. I don't even want to see her face anymore. She was a plague, disrupting our family. I regret speaking harshly to Donna and Betty. Let's all cooperate and live together peacefully from now on." Their complete reversal and eagerness to reconcile felt repulsive, but I couldn't close the door due to Andrew's force. Thinking of calling the police or screaming for help. "What are you doing?" Betty emerged from the back. holding some documents, which she handed to me. I thought they might show up again, so I prepared this just in case. The document from a detective indicated that Betty had been collecting evidence of Andrew's affair without my knowledge. While I was at work, detectives visited both here and the in-laws' house several times, gathering evidence of the affair. Andrew has always struggled to hold down even part-time jobs and has frequently changed jobs since becoming a salaried employee. I was impressed when he seemed to focus on his work after marrying Donna. However, in recent years, he started spending more time away from home, so I suspected an affair but didn't want to interfere by telling anyone. Listening to Betty's words, Andrew, realizing what was written on the documents I was holding, forcibly took them from me. You act like you've got it all figured out. Is it fun for you to doubt me and gather evidence behind my back? Your body and personality are truly finished. I was irritated by Andrew, who still mocked Betty's physique even after all this. Even if he's family, a man who can't control his own desires has no right to belittle Betty. Betty calmed me down, my face red with anger. You can say whatever you want about me. I have the documents saved digitally, so it doesn't matter how much you tear them up. But using the house funds that Donna and I worked hard to save for your affair is a serious offense. What? We had created a joint debit card separate from our personal ones for saving money for the house. The money I used for a new life with Betty was from my personal debit card, set aside for the house. Andrew managed the joint debit card, and I only deposited a fixed amount into it every month, so I hardly knew the detailed balance. In hindsight, I had doubts why, even after saving for over 10 years, we hadn't reached our goal amount. But, thinking that Andrew, who worked hard from morning till night every day, I just kept depositing without saying anything. I had no idea that it was all going to Sandra. Now, I feel no emotion towards Andrew, but I'm frustrated that my money, saved while enduring harassment from Karen and giving up my hobbies, was used freely without my notice, and at my own obliviousness. It turns out my love was one-sided. Andrew and Karen were just using my feelings for their benefit. Realizing that all the time I spent on these two was wasted, I felt despair and, at the same time, a sense of relief. My feelings will never go towards these people again. Gone was his initial bravado. Andrew, now pale and looking down, was quickly taken away by a shaken Karen. Afterwards, based on the documents Betty gave me, I hired a lawyer and began the process of suing Andrew for compensation in the divorce. From what the lawyer later told me, Andrew and Karen faced a lot of trouble. The claims from Paul and me left Andrew unable to sustain his lifestyle, drowning in debt. By then, most of the house funds were gone, and no amount of overtime could cover the payments. Furthermore, Andrew had not been properly attending his job, indulging in luxuries like dining and traveling with Sandra, who had taken a long leave. This led to his dismissal, leaving him without an income, and he had to ask Karen for help. When I lived with them, Karen, who survived on old age pension and the living expenses we paid, found life difficult and eventually had to sell the in-laws' house and land. Even then, the payments were overwhelming, and Andrew had to look for a job again. Struggling to make ends meet, he lived in an old apartment, attending interview after interview, but his refusal to do manual labor or work overtime made job hunting difficult. Seeing him struggle, Karen took up multiple low-wage part-time jobs to try and stabilize their life, but considering she had never worked properly before, it's uncertain if she can keep it up. While I feel a bit sorry for Karen, forced to work because of Andrew's divorce compensation and settlements, I wish she'd direct her resentment towards Andrew, not others. And I hope she learns from Betty's strength to live independently without relying on anyone. As for Sandra, she became a single mother right after giving birth, relying on her parents' home. Hearing this, I was relieved that an innocent baby wouldn't be left stranded, but for her, it seemed to mark the beginning of her hell. She was raised under strict parents, and unable to bear it, fled home right after high school graduation. At that time, she married her classmate Paul, living in fear of her parents' shadow. And then she met Andrew at her new job, and it seems I was engulfed in the thrill of an illicit affair with Andrew, who was married. The result was an excessively passionate relationship that led to a pregnancy. All I could do was pray that the baby's happiness wouldn't be jeopardized. Having finally severed ties with Andrew and Karen, I continued my life with Betty. However, one day, Betty told me about her marriage plans, which took me by surprise. It turns out, the person was a friend from her student days, someone who had supported her as a secretary since she started her business. Betty had hesitated to tell me because it meant our life together would end. "I just want you to be happy, without worrying about me." But I told her. The wedding was a small affair with only Betty's company employees and friends invited, but was held luxuriously at a famous chapel. During her speech, there was a message for me, and I found myself crying more than ever before. Once Betty's moving preparations were finished, the reality of living alone hit me. I felt a bit lonely, but my heart was clear. This was because, at the same time as her marriage announcement, she scouted me for a product planning job. Seeing how smoothly Donna took care of me, I realized that to create products that meet our customers' needs, we need opinions from the field. I think with Donna, we can create hit products related to wheelchairs, so would you like to try? I had worked hard in caregiving, sometimes facing harsh words or feeling frustrated when care didn't go as planned. But I knew I wasn't the only one who felt this way. If there was any way I could help progress in the caregiving industry, even slightly, I wanted to take on the challenge. Betty welcomed my willingness with open arms. So, I ended up working at her company, and the job was rewarding and enjoyable every day. Most employees had some form of physical limitation, and we supported each other in our daily tasks. Everyone was dedicated to their work, listened to my suggestions, and considered them positively. With their support, we gradually produced hit products, and I got involved in tasks I had never experienced before, like presenting our products to caregiving facilities. The job received positive feedback from inside and outside the company, and I grew even more passionate about it. Even after getting married, Betty made time for me. We continue to visit art museums, though now only about once a month. Ironically, it was Andrew who brought us together, but I believe the bond between us is much